welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're here on YouTube, not live. Time for our Super Bowl preview, Sam.
Yeah, and it'll be our last show from the studio, right?
Last show in the studio here. PFF studio, we've come to the end of our agreement, our arrangement.
Yep.
That is through the Super Bowl. We're here. So this is it for us in the studio where we used to record the PFF NFL podcast and where we currently record Check the Mic.
Yeah, so we're going to be, remote for a little while, a couple of months while we're building out a new studio that we found. And then we'll be having a new home.
Did we sign on that? Did we finish on that yet? The deal?
I don't know.
It's close.
I don't think there's a lack of, I don't think we're in danger of getting them sniped.
Yeah, I don't think so.
There's a few of them available.
We found a spot. We've got building plans in the works. Things are in the works here.
Yeah.
Place down here in Cincinnati. So thanks to PFF for letting us rent the place out for a little bit. And we'll be moving on. And so it's Super Bowl week. We're recording this, full disclosure on this preview here. This is happening the Sunday before the Super Bowl. Pre-recording it. It will drop on Monday morning. Super Bowl week is going to be a little bit like Senior Bowl week, a lot of behind the scenes, just talking to whoever we can. So we don't have a definitive plan on shows throughout this week, throughout Super Bowl week, other than the Super Bowl recap show, which will be taking place, weather willing here, right outside the Superdome.
Almost certainly not in a hotel room this time.
Almost certainly not in a hotel room. We'll see. Percentages are high. So we're going to get into our Super Bowl preview. It's all brought to you by PrizePicks. We'll get into each of the matchups and everything. Before we get into it, though, had a good week over at the Senior Bowl. A lot of behind-the-scenes content there on the YouTube channel. And it was an electric finish to the Senior Bowl week. Jack Besh caps an emotional week with a game-winning touchdown. So big week down there in Mobile.
Yeah, it was a fun week. Interesting week as well. My first time down there in Mobile. Yeah, it was a cool week. Hopefully you guys have checked out the behind-the-scenes little video, the vlog that we did. And if not, go look at that.
Yeah, go check it out. Go check out YouTube. So stay subscribed on YouTube. You never know when something's going to drop this week. We're going to do all sorts of behind-the-scenes fun in New Orleans. We're heading out there Monday. We're there Monday to Monday. I'm going to my first Super Bowl, too. We'll get you. This is your third.
Again, likely. Who knows what can happen between now and then.
As of now, we're on. Right. As of now, no one's stealing my credential.
Right. As of now, you have a credential, which puts you several steps ahead of previous years.
Yeah. Previous years, I kind of had a credential. Someone sniped it from me.
Right.
Kind of thought I could get a credential, and they're like, "Oh, sorry, too late." So this year, I got my name on a piece of paper that's going to let me in.
You're very excited by this, but if the seating arrangement is anything like it's been for the last couple of years, you're going to have some struggles getting into those.
Is it like a middle seat on
that's exactly what it's like. It's like a middle seat in a plane, except instead of, airline around you, it's like tiny chairs and scaffolding.
Maybe I'll sit next to Greg, and
you'll need to.
Let me use some legroom.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're excited to get to New Orleans, even if the legroom's going to be tight for the actual game. Let's get into it. Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. They're playing in the big game / Super Bowl. That's the one. Kansas City favored by 1.5 as of right now, over under 48.5 from our friends over at FanDuel. We'll do both sides of the ball here, starting with the Kansas City Chiefs offense. High level, what are we looking at here? Mahomes and the Chiefs going up against this Vic Fangio Eagles defense.
Yeah, it's 1.5, and I don't think it's moved either. I think it opened with the Chiefs favored by 1.5. It's been that way pretty much the whole way through. Usually the line opens and then it moves a little bit, but this is it's like they nailed it right away.
This is one of those games, no matter what evidence was shown this year. I know the Chiefs have an incredible record, right? One loss with Mahomes as the starter. No one's going to let the Chiefs be the underdog like they were last year, right? They find a way to win these playoff games. They win these close games. I don't see this line moving a whole lot.
No, but it's also kind of like a reflection of the Chiefs team right now is not the same Chiefs team as it was earlier in the season when it was struggling through some games, and it wasn't a particularly good football team even when their record was amazing. And people like Ryan Fitzpatrick, I don't mean to call him out individually, but just the first name that came to mind who was saying this, eventually if they keep doing this, it's going to come back and haunt them, right? Maybe it'll be in the playoffs against a Buffalo or whatever. But they were playing better towards the end of the season. And obviously Week 18 complicates it because they rested everybody, so they got whomped by the Broncos. But, the couple of weeks before that, they'd looked better. In the playoffs, they have looked better. This is a different team than it was earlier in the season. They're healthier. They've gotten a lot of players back. Like, it is literally a different team in terms of the personnel they're putting out there.
Yeah, and especially offensively with what Kansas City has, which is exactly what we're talking about. I think storyline-wise, let's go back a few years here, Sam. 2021 was the year where Kansas City was coming off of a 2019 Super Bowl, a 2020 loss in the Super Bowl, and then in 2021 is when the league started to say, okay, we're kind of afraid of Tyreek Hill. We're kind of afraid of Mahomes and the Chiefs throwing the ball down the field. Started to run a lot more too high against Mahomes and the Chiefs. And that was the first time in his career where he hit like a little bit of a slump, a little bit of a lull statistically in the middle of that season, or performance-wise. Statistics that year ended up perfectly fine, and they lose in the AFC Championship. But remember, that was the year where the too high fixation kind of started, and a lot of it was like, man, we can't let Tyreek Hill get behind the defense. We can't let Mahomes. We're going to make him be patient, right? And he struggled with that relative to previous performance, right? It's all relative. They struggled with that for a little bit. And then, again, Kansas City goes on. They lose to the Bengals in the AFC Championship. Since that point, though, that helped to push the Chiefs into not only trading Tyreek Hill before the 2022 season, but also essentially changing the entire offense, right? It was a lot more throw the ball underneath, get the ball out of Mahomes' hands. It was a lot less hero ball from Mahomes and more of a, I don't want to say dink and dunk, but for lack of a better term, a short passing attack, right? It was always been heavy screens, but the underneath stuff far more than the downfield passing attack. And the Chiefs have gone on and won the Super Bowl in 22 and 23, and that's what the Chiefs offense is known for. So now you have the architect of the defense that at one point slowed Mahomes down just for a touch, right? And by the way, statistically over the last couple of years, Mahomes is like a top 10-ish, 10 or 12 regular season quarterback. So the overall stats and production have taken a bit of a hit the last couple of years, but in the playoffs, the Chiefs are built to win, always find a way to win, and don't have those setbacks. So interesting matchup here with Fangio on one side with the Eagles, and then Mahomes on the other side. They've faced each other a lot through the years.
Yeah, and again, like Mahomes adapted his game and became very good at attacking that style of defense, even though initially that kind of caused some problems, and there was that adjustment period away from the explosive offense from at the beginning of his career into more of a patient, horizontal type of offense. He has made that adjustment and done it extremely well. And the other thing we have to bear in mind that we say every time we're talking about a Mahomes or a Chiefs playoff game is he's a different player in the playoffs than he is in the regular season. And people throw that around as a cliche, I think, all the time, generally, right? But Mahomes, I think, is one of the few players that is genuinely true about. It's not true when you talk about a lot of other players. They're just, maybe they're the same, or maybe they have a couple of clutch moments here or there. But it's not like they consistently play differently once you get to the postseason. Mahomes does, though. Like, in his entire NFL career, every single postseason grade of his at PFF is really good. His worst one was his first season. And every other season or off season, postseason, is kind of spectacular. And in a couple of those, he's been dealing with like significant injuries. So, you have to deal with, okay, it's Mahomes, but it's the best version of Mahomes that you're going to see, almost certainly, which means a guy who has incredible timing, incredible playmaking ability, understands how and when to take off scrambling and can hurt you on the ground, and critically, tends not to make mistakes.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the legacy stuff and what this means. Obviously, the Chiefs going for a three-peat, and I think when you compare them to the other dynasties, whether it's the Patriots, whether it's the Niners, the Cowboys, the Steelers in the 70s, I mean, the Chiefs just haven't slipped up a whole lot. The Mahomes-led Chiefs are 17-3 in the playoffs. 2 losses to Brady's Patriots, Brady's Bucks, and Burrow's Bengals. That's it. Those are the 3 losses. And so they just haven't slipped up a whole lot. And when you compare that to, say, the Niners, say like the Niners dynasty was like 2 Super Bowls early in the 80s, 2 Super Bowls at the end of the 80s. And the Cowboys was split up a little bit, right? There's a loss in the middle there, but it also didn't sustain nearly as long as what Kansas City's putting together. New England was essentially two dynasties within a 20-year period, right? So it's incredible the longevity, but they also had a 10-year stretch where they didn't win a Super Bowl. The Chiefs just haven't slipped up a whole lot, right? And they certainly haven't slipped. They haven't slipped up since 2021. So that is the tricky part. No matter what we do to break down this matchup or that matchup, there is this idea of the inevitability of the Chiefs who, no matter how you slice it, make fewer mistakes than their opponents, make the big plays when it comes down to it, and they do seemingly are seemingly calibrated to win by 3, right? To make sure that they win by 3, which they seem to do in every big game.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like the last one of those losses is that Super Bowl where their entire offensive line was basically a backup unit at that point, and they finally reached the tipping point where it was just, that's too much. You can't handle that volume of injuries. So, one of their very infrequent losses is sort of directly, I think, attributable to you just found so many injuries you can't overcome that at that point. The offensive line for that game was Mike Remmers at left tackle, Nick Allegretti at left guard, Austin Reiter at center, Stefan Wisniewski at right guard, and Andrew Wiley at right tackle. I don't think any of those guys were the scheduled starter at the start of the season, maybe one of them. Like that, you can't deal with that level of injury.
So let's start with that matchup here, because in the 2022 Super Bowl, the Eagles annually have one of the best pass rushes in the NFL. I mean, this says if you're going to use PFF's grades, if you're going to use pressure rate, whatever it is, the Eagles are top 5. I mean, each year for the last 10 years, right? And top 2 or 3 often. Number 2 PFF pass rush grade in the NFL this year. And if you go back to that 22 matchup, it felt like, okay, the Chiefs offense hasn't faced a pass rush like the Eagles. Can they get after him? They got Hassan Reddick off the edge. They have Fletcher Cox. They have Brandon Graham. They have all these guys. But remember, the footing on that field was horrendous. And the Eagles got absolutely no rush in that game. And they were also negated by the quick-hitting pass game of the Chiefs. Similar question this year. Now it's Jalen Carter and it's Josh Sweat, and it's a little different. It's a different group. Nolan Smith coming off the edge. Brandon Graham's trying to come back. Practice window's open. He's trying to make his do the swan song thing last game here. Can the Eagles get pressure against the Chiefs offensive line? As we've talked about, they kicked Joe Thuney out to left tackle. Mike Caliendo's coming in and playing guard. On paper, that's a mismatch if it's Jalen Carter going up against Caliendo. If it's Jalen Carter going up against Trey Smith, it's one of the best matchups in the NFL. Can the Eagles actually get some pressure on Mahomes in this game?
Yeah, I mean, that's critical. Again, you go back to that previous meeting in the Super Bowl, the Chiefs had their starting offensive line in that game, like the entirety of it, right? That was the full offensive line, and you had the fact that for some reason, well, why was that field so slippy? It had rained and they'd left the windows open or whatever.
It was in Arizona.
Stadium.
Remember, it's in Phoenix. It's natural
well, Phoenix
grass.
Is what knows, yeah.
And it was something about the humidity from where they stored it, and then they put it into the dry dome, and it made it slippery, whatever it was.
So, yeah, that shouldn't be an issue this time around. It's crazy. A proper dome with no roll-in field. Like, it's a dome with turf.
The footing, I mean, it negated, and it was a bigger issue because the Eagles were built upon a 4-man rush, and they had, remember the defensive coordinator then was Jonathan Gannon, who was similar type of scheme as Fangio, right? Sit over the top, nothing deep. But you got to trust that pass rush to get home. The Eagles couldn't do anything. They were falling all over the place. That's why it was significant in that game.
So, the Eagles should have a better time of actually rushing the passer because you're not going to have the slipping issue. On the other hand, and the fact that they're going up against the Chiefs offensive line that does have 2 players that are not their intended starters. The left side, essentially, is not what it wants to be. So you would say, okay, that is a potential mismatch in Philadelphia's favor. On the other hand, it was for Buffalo as well a week ago, and we highlighted that as, can Buffalo cause problems on that side? And it didn't at all. I mean, generally, I think Joe Thuney playing left tackle has been fine. It's been good for a guard, but it's not necessarily been good overall, and they know they have to give him plenty of help. Actually, Caliendo is potentially the bigger problem inside, but Thuney was basically perfect against Buffalo. It really did no problems whatsoever. And okay, Caliendo lost a couple of times, but that left side was not a problem against the Bills.
This is where I feel like Andy Reid and the Chiefs are just in their bag, though, right? The matchup where they have to kind of negate a great pass rush, they just get rid of the ball extremely quickly. And if Fangio is going to sit over the top and play, the too high type of shells that they like to play, they'll move the safeties around or whatever. But for the most part, it's like give up the underneath stuff, come up and tackle. Well, the Chiefs are throw the underneath stuff, but use trickeration, use our speed to create mismatches, right? To get Xavier Worthy into space, right? Hollywood Brown, whoever it might be, to Travis Kelce. The Eagles just gave up over 10 catches to Zach Ertz in the NFC Championship. This feels like a game, if Travis Kelce isn't getting his attention, he's going to get his, as far as Maybe he has 8 or 10 catches. We don't know if this is going to be, the other storyline aspect. Is this going to be Kelsey's last game, right? There's a prop bet. Is he going to propose right after? This is important stuff that we have to break down here in our Kansas City offense breakdown here.
Very important.
In the Houston game, first game of the playoff, they did get some pressure on Mahomes, right? A lot, but he made plays, right? He had the falling over touchdown. He made plays under pressure, or at least got rid of the ball quickly enough that pressure didn't matter. Buffalo did not win up front at all, right? So look, has Kansas City had games where they've given up pressure this year? Absolutely. But I also think in the Buffalo game, they did such a good job of moving the pocket, using Mahomes as a designed runner. And that's the other aspect here. Like, what plays are the Chiefs dialing up that they haven't dialed up this year? What have they saved for this point? We talked. Buffalo was talking about they hadn't seen Mahomes on that the keeper that was like a 10 or 12-yard touchdown, whatever it was. The Chiefs always have a little something extra up their sleeve. So I just, bottom line is, I feel good about Kansas City being able to move the ball despite the Eagles' defense being so good this year.
Remember when Nick Wright basically predicted that on the podcast? Like, he was buying into this idea that the Chiefs are legitimately keeping their powder dry, not showing a bunch of stuff that they actually have sitting in reserve, ready for the playoffs. Everyone's like, that's crazy. Nobody treats the regular season with that level of disdain and contempt. But the Chiefs know that they were going to get through anyway. Whether you say they've been working on a version 2.0 of the system to deploy in the playoffs, or whether it's simply that they're good enough at tendency breaking that once you get to the playoffs, they will do something different that they haven't put on tape so far. Either way, the point remains true that the Chiefs will shock you with things that you're not prepared for, and that's the ultimate of high-end coaching.
I do wonder if Kansas City leans on the run game a little bit, right? The Fangio defenses kind of invite you to run, and so their goal is to defeat the run with 6 and 7 in the box as much as possible. We've seen pretty good running from Kareem Hunt. You have Isaiah Pacheco back there. How much does Kansas City take what's there? But that's also how Kansas City's played this year, right? Remember their offense, if you're using advanced metrics, if you're using points per game, when Mahomes is the starter, they're like 10th or 11th in points per game this year. If you're using EPA, they're pretty good. But if you're using success rate, they're very good, right? So their whole game plays into Philly's game, right? Philly's saying, here, go ahead, try to take 3, 4, 5 yards at a time. And Kansas City's saying, we'll take 3, 4, 5 yards at a time, stay on schedule, convert those third downs, and have long, sustainable drives. So I think both teams are kind of playing into what each other wants to do. To me, it's going to come down to big one here, Sam. You got to force some turnovers if you're the Eagles. And no one's forced a turnover against Kansas City. I'll say Kansas City turned it over when Mahomes muffed the snap or the handoff last week against Buffalo. It was kind of unforced by the defense. Kansas City has had a handful of turnovers since the midway mark of the season.
Yeah.
So unless something happens, right? Mahomes had an interception in the Super Bowl last year. Unless one of those things happens, some sort of mistake from Kansas City, I think they're going to have their long, sustained drives against Philly here.
In 4 of his postseasons, Mahomes has a 1 turnover-worthy play. So, in 4 separate postseasons, he's had 1 play where he's put the ball in harm's way. Again, generally speaking, you get to the playoffs and Mahomes simply stops making critical errors. And that doesn't mean the ball won't be turned over anyway. You can have an interception on what isn't a turnover-worthy play, or, there's various other ways to create turnovers. But again, it's like you said, they're probably not going to give you one. You are going to have to force it. Now, this Eagles defense is incredibly good at doing that. I mean, they have mastered the peanut punch as a unit. Nick Sirianni has been harping on that a lot. They forced multiple of those plays against Washington. 2 of them were like legitimate picture-perfect peanut punch type forced fumbles. The third one was more the Washington player just ran into a wall of bodies and coughed the ball up. But it is a defense that is extremely good at knocking the ball out of the grasp of ball carriers. So Mahomes doesn't need to do it. Maybe Mahomes will play a perfect game or a very close to perfect game, but everyone that's going to be holding the ball for Kansas City, all those receivers, Kelsey, Worthy, Juju Smith-Schuster, anyone that's going to be running the ball, Pacheco, Kareem Hunt, those guys are going to have defenders launching punches at that football, and they've got to keep hold of it.
The tricky part with the analysis here is we've now seen the Chiefs play the Texans coming off of a game when the Texans had 4 picks of Justin Herbert, blocked field goals, and the whole thing, right? Chiefs didn't make those mistakes the next week. Then Buffalo comes to town. Buffalo was coming off a game where they had 3 key turnovers, 2 against Lamar Jackson, 1 against Mark Andrews. Didn't do that to Kansas City, right? So even when – and now Philly's coming off a game where they had, 5 turnovers against Washington. They had all those forced fumbles and the pick and everything. It's tough to replicate that against this Chiefs offense.
Well, what you're probably not going to get is that type of turnover, right? You're not going to get Mahomes just randomly airmailing one to a linebacker or to a safety or to somebody. They're not going to gift you one. It doesn't mean you can't turn them over, but it's going to have to look like it did for a lot of those Washington turnovers, right? Like a combination of whoever it was, Zach Bond and Cooper DeJean, forcing the ball out or that type of thing. That's what it's going to have to look like. You are going to have to go and create the turnovers because they're probably not just going to put one on the ground.
All right, matchup-wise, I mentioned Jalen Carter up front against those guards. I think that's going to be huge.
Yeah. And how they defend. So that's really interesting because Jalen Carter against Caliendo at left guard is like a nightmare mismatch for Kansas City. So you'd say, well, that's easy. We just dedicate extra help there. But they're probably already dedicating extra help to Joe Thuney because he's a left guard playing left tackle. And even if he's coming off a very good game, there have been games previously where he's gone up against a good pass rusher and needed the help, right? So now you're caught between a rock and a hard place of where do we dedicate that help? You watch Jalen Carter against Washington, and anytime he's not double teamed, he's in the backfield. So that is a challenge for Kansas City. There are things they can do. They can slide the whole line that way. They can put a back or a tight end out there chipping as well. They can negate it, but that's a challenge now. That's 2 spots that they theoretically have to try and dedicate some extra resources
and
to.
They have been helping Thuney for the most part, right? So
Yes.
I think, and so that's where it's on Josh Sweat. It is on Nolan Smith. Jalix Hunt, the rookie small schooler, right, that had probably had a career-high 59 snaps in the NFC Championship game against Washington. He had a really nice game. He's very athletic. I wonder if they could use him in a pseudo spy role. The tricky part with rushing Mahomes is you want to keep contained. You don't want to let him break the pocket, but at the same time, you want to you want those negative plays. You want to take him down and get off the field on 3rd down.
Yeah, it almost seems like the best mechanism for stopping Mahomes is actually to force him out of the pocket, but in a specific direction. Remember, years ago, one of the first teams that actually caused him problems and seemed to have an answer was the Raiders. And they did that, right? It's let's crash in one direction, force him left, and then there'll be a spy ready for that to pounce the second he breaks the pocket.
Yeah.
And it was how come everybody else isn't doing this? And there's obviously more to it than that, but that was kind of what we saw at times against Buffalo, was they had this sort of coordinated pass rush that would all collapse in one direction, meaning immediately Mahomes is going to break into the space, and then Milano is ready to just pounce on him the second he moves. That might actually be the mechanism to try and stop Mahomes is, slant the entire rush in one direction, create a hole, one by your design as opposed to one where a hole opens up, you don't know where it's going to be, and Mahomes is the guy that exploits it, to actually point him towards a specific hole, but know that you're creating that, and there's a linebacker ready and waiting to jump into it.
I'll also be interested to see if Philly plays a little bit more man coverage. Buffalo wanted to play more man because they had success, but
right.
they had the injury. Darius Slay and Quinyon Mitchell can play man.
Yeah,
and
Buffalo would have up until Christian Benford.
And Buffalo absolutely would have, and that was a week after Houston, who have Derek Stingley on the outside. You're where's Derek Stingley in this game? Well, he's been avoided, right? The Chiefs have answers in the middle of the field. They have answers with non-outside receiver targets. I do wonder if Philly just says, we're going to play lockdown on the outside, crowd the middle of the field with everyone else, and try to take away some of what Kansas City likes to do. Force Mahomes to make big-time throws down the field, which, again, he's capable of, but they're just lower percentage shots and a little bit different from the way Fangio might play historically. So I love the matchup. I'm not trying to take anything away from the Eagles' defense. Maybe we only talked up Kansas City too much. I just think if Philly plays their game, Kansas City kind of has answers to Philly's game, and the Philly defense has to force some turnovers, sack Mahomes a few times, create some of those negative plays, get off the field, really trust that, 7 or 8 deep up front to make some plays. Maybe Zach Bond on a key blitz here and there. But there's a lot of pressure on Bond. Oren Burks filling in for Nakobe Dean feels like the type of guy that's going to have a target on his back as far as the offense goes for Kansas City.
Yeah, even though he's coming off a very good game. He was excellent against Washington. But Oren Burke's been in the league for a long enough time now that you would think that's unlikely to be his baseline at this stage. That's more, a lot of players are capable of having a very good game.
All right, so we're going to give you our path to Kansas City scoring 30-plus again here in a minute. But got to tell you about some new friends. It's Zbiotics, and it's a great way to have a few drinks and feel great the next day. That's what it is. Zbiotics, pre-alcohol. You can have a great night, and a great next day with Zbiotics. Zbiotics pre-alcohol prebiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered prebiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking, and here's how it works. You drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in your gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for the rough next day. So pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. And just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night, drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Like when, back in college or something, Sam. I drank back then. I think Zbiotics would have been helpful.
Or at a wedding, instead of having to drink copious amounts of water afterwards. Could have taken this first.
Yeah, Zbiotics would have made for a better day after of your sister's wedding back in August. So with pre-alcohol, you can stay on track and not let winter travel and celebrations like the Super Bowl throw you off course. Go to zbiotics.com/checkthemic to learn more. Get 15% off your first order when you use Check the Mic at checkout. So Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/checkthemic and use code CheckTheMic at checkout for 15% off. All right, Sam, give me a path to 30-plus for Kansas City against the lowest scoring defense, best defense in the NFL.
I feel like it's maintaining that 3rd and 4th down efficiency. Kansas City, all the way through the season, have been surviving and thriving on 3rd and 4th downs, even when the rest of the offense has not looked that great. If they can continue that against a Fangio defense that's designed to stop that kind of success, then I think they can hit 30.
I'm going to say it's Travis Kelce going nuts again, middle of the field, much like Zach Ertz did against Washington. I think Washington did a really nice job attacking the underneath coverage of Philadelphia. Kansas City's built to attack the underneath coverage. And then you throw in the Super Bowl 2 years ago against Philly. Remember, they're dialing up those orbit plays, 2 wide open touchdowns. Mahomes is awesome. He's great. But any one of us, any of our fans probably could have thrown those 2 touchdowns to Kadarius Toney because they were so dialed up and perfect. Kansas City will have a couple gimmies in there. So they'll have a couple plays. I think they'll attack the underneath coverage extremely well and just be patient. They're going to be patient against a defense that requires offensive patience. I think that's Kansas City's game. And if they play turnover free, feed Kelce in perhaps his final game, then it'll be Kansas City's path to 30-plus in this one. We'll do that for Philly, too.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do their path to 30-plus. Anything else on Kansas City's offense here before we flip sides?
No, I think that's it.
All right, well, if financial wellness is a goal of yours, you got to check out Rocket Money, which shows all of my subscriptions right in one place. Helps easily cancel ones that we've forgotten. In fact, we just learned that 85% of people have at least one paid subscription going unused each month. Rocket Money pulls together all of my spending across all of my different accounts so I can clearly track my spending habits and see where I can cut back. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps to lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money's dashboard gives you a clear view of your expenses across all of your accounts. You can easily create a personalized budget with custom categories to help keep track of your spending. And you can see your monthly spending trends in each category to know exactly where your money's going. You get alerts if your bills increase in price, if there's unusual spending activity, or if you're close to going over budget. And then the best part, I think, is Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you. So they automatically scan your bills to find opportunities to save. Then you can ask them to negotiate for you. They'll deal with customer service so you don't have to. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/checkthemic today. That's rocketmoney.com/checkthemic. All right, man, Philadelphia's offense going up against this Kansas City defense. Remember 2 years ago, Jalen Hurts had one of his best games of all time. You take one fumble. There was a bad fumble in there, fumble 6. Take that away, and Hurts was on point. They were making plays down the field. Very efficient offense for the Eagles 2 years ago in the Super Bowl against Kansas City.
Yeah, they won the Super Bowl, and Patrick Mahomes was at pains to talk about what a great game Jalen Hurts had. It was like, I don't want his game to get lost in, the result, essentially. He was incredible. Again, outside of the one critical turnover-worthy play that basically cost them the football game. So that is unfortunate when that happens. But yeah, he was incredible. And they might need him to do something like that again if they're going to win, except this time around, you do have the extra wrinkle of Saquon Barkley in that backfield, transforming not necessarily the overall success rate of the run game, but turbocharging the plays when those plays are successful. Like instead of gaining 8 yards, this one might gain 85 yards and go to the house.
Can you bank on Saquon once again creating that big play? He has been so consistent with it. It does feel like he has a 50 or 60 yarder in every game. He only has 9 this year. That's less than 1 a game. But it's incredible what he's been able to do, even just the smallest crease and his ability to turn that into a 50 or 60 yard touchdown. He's up to 22% of the NFL's 50-plus yard runs this year. So, yeah, the Saquon Barkley factor. I mean, look, I thought the NFC Championship was the perfect encapsulation of this Eagles offense. The Washington defense is one of the weaker ones, I think, in the playoffs. But the Eagles offense, when they are cooking, Hurts is making good decisions, getting the ball to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and at any point, Saquon can create that big play. I think as long as they don't turn the ball over, as long as they don't make that egregious mistake, we'll talk about Spags in a minute. It'll come down to a lot of those third downs, like we said with Josh Allen, right? And we know we're all talking about that 4th and 5, the big play. What do you do when Spags blitzes? But I do feel like Kansas City has a chance to have a lot more success maybe on early downs than other teams have had against Kansas City.
Yeah, like the previous game, it was still a very run-heavy offense, but it was a run-heavy attack kind of built off Jalen Hurts' ability to run. That just happened. Like it's one where when you add the threat of a rushing quarterback, the whole run game obviously just gets inflated, right? Because you've got his numbers on top of the regular ground numbers, and it's more. Now, though, it's a run. It's like the league's most run-heavy offense when you sort of factor in situation. But it's really built off Saquon Barkley, and you still have that rushing threat of Jalen Hurts, who's able to make big plays in his own right. But that's a significant difference from the last time. Like the Chiefs' run defense is fine. It's probably better than average, but it's not amazing. And they've got to try and stop this Saquon Barkley-led offense. They had, when we were in Mobile one night, they had that previous Super Bowl on in the background of a bar, and that Chiefs defense was just swarming to the football in that game. Like the number of plays where 3 or 4 guys are pouncing on somebody from the Eagles, close to the line of scrimmage. They really played a hard, aggressive football game. You're going to have to do that against Saquon Barkley because we saw against Washington, if you leave it to one guy, he's going to make that one guy look ridiculous, spin out of the tackle, break the tackle, cut outside of him, and he's gone.
And in that game, A.J. Brown made some huge plays. He had a contested catch, probably had no business catching it long. Was it a touchdown or down at the 1? A huge catch down the sideline right before the half. I mean, the Eagles had that game in control. Mahomes was battling an injury. It looked like the Eagles had that game in control. Mahomes bounced back, and the punt return. I mean, it'll come down to those things as well. Special teams, and Eagles have been good there. Chiefs have been good there. Something has to give from a special teams perspective. But, yeah, it does feel like this Eagles offense is going to have to get those big plays on the perimeter. And so I think it's one of those, A.J. Brown's got to show up, right? Inner whatever, excellence. Got to be a big thing in this one, and he was outstanding against Washington. I think they're going to have to win those one-on-ones on the outside against Kansas City's corners because they're going to crowd the box. I think they're going to focus a lot on this run game because, look, Philly's offensive line is fantastic. They run block extremely well. You add in the Hurts keeper ability, right? Yeah. He had the 44-yarder against the Rams like you're talking about. All of the math is in Philly's favor. And if for Kansas City to offset the math, I think they crowd the box and do try to take away the run game and say, go ahead, take the low percentage shot. If there's one thing about Spags' defense, it's not even that it's sound, so to speak, air quotes here. I had like a Twitter follower say, because I said, hey, Spags does it again. He's like, yeah, there's 3 guys open on this play. And it's like, that's kind of the beauty of Spags is every now and again, there's a blitz that might not be sound, even on the chalkboard, but you got to figure it out in 0.4 seconds, right? You got to figure that out faster than ever. And he's kind of banking on you not finding that guy. And by the way, most of the time, he's not just leaving dudes running wide open. It's actually tight man coverage on the back end and low percentage shots. I think they're going to do, Kansas City, everything they can possibly do to put Philly into those low percentage shots. Yeah. And so that's Jalen Hurts accuracy outside the numbers to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith.
They're also extremely good at disguising the blitz. Like, pretty much every blitz is unsound somewhere if you're aware of where it's coming from and you're aware of how many people are coming. Like, you can make adjustments either to pick it up or to understand where the hot receiver should go. Like, once you know where the blitz is, you can deal with that. What Spags is really good at is dialing up a blitz from a weird place that you're not expecting to see coming right at the time you don't expect it to show up, right? And they get extremely blitz happy, late in the game in the fourth quarter. They overload these attacks, and offenses so far have not been able to handle it, whether it's the protections, whether it's the quarterback not knowing where that blitz is coming from, whether it's adding an extra DB on top of it. So it's almost like a double overload blitz. There's one more guy than you were expecting to come. He's so good at doing that, and unless you anticipate it, you're not able to deal with it. And that's that, the classic Josh Allen play where Benjamin Solak and Ryan Fitzpatrick and everybody else got into it. There's a classic example of that, right? It wasn't just as simple of, oh, look, there's a blitz. Josh Allen should have had better answers. Like, that was a blitz that had multiple layers to it that ensured that it was going to end up as like a busted play. And even then, Allen actually managed to find a miracle, got it in the general vicinity of Dalton Kincaid, who should have come down with the football, difficult adjustment though it was. But that blitz turned what could have been a perfectly successful play into needing a Josh Allen miracle to have any chance of success. And it was dialing up the extra player that they just did not expect to be coming, right? They should have had the first guy picked up. Even if they'd had that guy picked up, there's an extra guy coming on the outside that they never anticipated until it was too late. That's what Spags is so good at. And they have to do that against the Eagles because, number one, again, it's the most run-heavy offense in the NFL. Number two, like their 2 biggest threats are the run. It's Saquon Barkley and Jalen Hurts. Number 3, their pass game is relatively low percentage anyway. So forcing them to lean more on the low percentage part of their offense is structurally sound even before you get into the idea of, well, the 2 things you want to be taking away first and foremost of those run threats anyway.
Jalen Hurts historically has not been great against the blitz. This year it's not a huge difference compared to not facing the blitz. Last year was a big part of the train wreck that was the Eagles' second half collapse.
And that's part of that low percentage passing stuff, right? Like the low percentage passing stuff, it's not going to get more high percentage by hurrying it.
Right. And so again, a big part of the blitz isn't just the quarterback. It's not just that. It's the entire scheme, right? It's the system, right? So we're talking Spags against Kellen Moore here, who, by the way, is very much in line to maybe be the Saints' next head coach. That is the expectation that after the Super Bowl,
he's going to seems to want the job.
Well, Mike McCarthy's bailed. Other people have bailed. I think Kellen Moore, Monday morning, regardless of what happens Sunday night, is walking down the street and final interview. And
he's going to stay in town.
He's going to stay in town, hang out, and maybe he wants to carpool back with us. I don't know. Anyway, Kellen's probably going to become the Saints head coach coming out of this. So anyway, Hurts has been far better against a traditional 4-man rush than against the blitz.
He's certainly not in the category of quarterbacks that you do not want to blitz. And I think a big part of that is not just Jalen Hurts, but it's systemic within this offense, which is, this is not a high percentage passing type of attack. And if you hurry that type of offense, like, it's not going to get more efficient by forcing it to get the ball in the air earlier, even if you're potentially exposing some open passes with that blitz. Like, overall, it's going to result in the low percentage passing offense remaining low percentage and now low percent under pressure.
Like I said, though, it's been better this year than it was with Brian Johnson as the offensive coordinator last year. Everything in Philly, particularly down the stretch, was like, hey, we didn't have any blitz answers. I think they've got more answers right now. And what I love about Philly's offense is all the dudes, man. It's like what it was like when I used to talk about Tennessee, and you don't know when one of these guys can take over the game, whether it is Saquon, whether it is A.J. Brown. We've seen games where Devontae Smith has taken over and looked like a true number one. I think they need high-end performances from their playmakers. The other thing to keep an eye on, Jalen Hurts was sacked 7 times in that first playoff game that they played against the Rams, a couple times last week against Washington. So it's not that it's a complete disaster, but we know it's a good offensive line. They had issues with the Rams' 5-man pressures. They had issues just picking those up a couple weeks ago, and they were some bad ones, right? Hurts has taken a few bad sacks that took them out of field goal range over these last couple weeks. Can't have any of those mistakes, right? It's got to be mistake-free football for the Eagles, getting the ball to their playmakers as quickly as possible.
I think a difference Saquon makes as well is he's had some very impressive blitz pickups over the course of the season as well.
Even the hold he got away with.
Yeah. Like, he's given up some pressure as well, but, he's a running back. All running backs will. But he's stuck his nose in there and picked up some, like, extremely aggressive, fast-attacking blitzes and given the quarterback time to make a play.
What else about this Philly? I mean, just the offensive line matchup. We talk every week about Chris Jones, and hey, you never know when he's going to line up over the right tackle and go win one-on-one. You don't have that luxury with the Eagles. Not that Lane Johnson's infallible, but you're not going out there saying, let me go pick on the right tackle on this rep. You're not going to do that like you can against other teams. So the Eagles' strength is absolutely at tackle with Lane Johnson, with Jordan Mailata. And by the way, one thing I regrettably forgot to mention in our extensive conference championship review, the injuries that Cam Jurgens and Landon Dickerson were playing through for the Eagles in that game those were wild, man. Cam Jurgens was so hurt, his back, dude wants to play, couldn't play. Then Dickerson gets hurt even more, that Jurgens had to go in and play center. And I'm just like, man, back injury to where you have to sit out the NFC Championship and you're thrown back in there, that can't feel good. Those guys battled through as much as they possibly could.
Yeah, both those guys basically couldn't move and were forced to rotate in the game just so they had somebody on the offensive line. Like, there was a play where Dickerson couldn't put weight on his leg, was almost in tears, and then it's like, oh, quick, I'll run back out there to play again. Like, I mean, that's
him and Jurgens were like arguing. Like, no, I'll go. Like, which guy wanted to sacrifice more for their team with the NFC title on the line? It was impressive.
And look, it's 2 weeks is significant there, right? They get the extra week break relative to a normal game, so that's huge. On the other hand, particularly Dickerson with his leg injury, I mean, is 2 weeks enough for him to be going up against Chris Jones? Like, he'll almost certainly play. He's playing even though he couldn't move. But is he 100%? That's potentially a variable relative to a random game 3 weeks ago with him there.
And as we've said before, the Chiefs are they the healthiest team in the NFL at this point, right? So Rashee Rice obviously out for the season. That's it as far as significant injuries. All their other significantly injured players came back, whether it's Jalen Watson at corner or Hollywood Brown coming back. And then they have that depth on the defensive line. The Mike Danas of the world, Charles Omenihu, those guys seem to show up in big games as well, especially Dana. Omenihu he does a really nice job creating mismatches with his length. So that matchup's going to be a big one. I think Kansas City's defensive front going up against this Eagles offensive line. Eagles offensive line health will be under the microscope this week.
Yeah, definitely. I think both teams' linebackers are like an interesting variable in the game. Obviously, the Eagles lost Nakobe Dean, so they were starting Oren Burks. Oren Burks had a really good game. Zach Bond actually had a game where he was exposed a little bit in coverage, which hasn't happened to him much this season, but did in the championship game against Washington. The Chiefs, Their linebackers are interesting generally because they're not like super athletes. They're not coverage focused the way a lot of teams have been with their linebackers. So you've got a team like Philadelphia who can deploy people like Dallas Goedert over the middle or Saquon Barkley on, those sort of pivot angle routes over the middle. All of a sudden you're putting a guy like Nick Bolton, say, a downhill run thumper who's not great in space. Suddenly that guy's trying to cover either a tall, rangy athlete like Goddard or a super freak athlete like Saquon Barkley in space. I mean, that has the potential.
Wheel routes.
That has the potential to go extremely badly for the Chiefs. And if it's not Nick Bolton, it could be Drew Tranquil, it can be Leo Chenal. Like any of those guys are not the type of linebacker you want covering somebody like that.
Anything else about Phil? It's good. It's a good point there because I think as much as I think A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith have to win those one-on-ones and make some big-time plays. I do wonder how much those other matchups that you're mentioning could be in Philly's favor there, whether it's Saquon or Goddard against safeties and linebackers. Is it at least one Saquon wheel route? We saw that earlier in the year. The other thing, just to be very generic, got to make good decisions in the red zone. Remember early in the year, Hurts was making a lot of bad decisions in the red zone. They cleaned that up as the season went on, but I just think Philly's offense has to play clean. They got to score in the red zone, can't turn it over, and have their big-time playmakers make plays in those one-on-ones that Kansas City's going to set up for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like, theoretically you would say that linebacker group could be targeted, but this is not an offense that necessarily loves passing over the middle. They like those, ISO routes on the sideline with those big receivers or talented sideline receiver, whereas they actually might want to start targeting that middle area more and work that as a bigger part of this offense.
All right, we're going to highlight a path to success for the Eagles, how to handle Spags, but first going to tell you about our friends over at Timeline. You get 10% off your order of MitoPure over at timeline.com/checkthemic. MitoPure is a supplement that can help you because it encourages cellular renewal. It works by promoting an essential cellular cleanup process that clears out dysfunctional mitochondria, aka your cell's battery packs. There are no supplements on the market that have better clinical research shown to be effective at targeting the effects of age-related cellular decline. And with regular use, you'll see and feel the difference in the form of improved energy levels, better workouts, faster recovery, more endurance, and more. In fact, MitoPure is shown to deliver double-digit increases in muscle strength and endurance without a change in exercise. This is your year to be your best, most energized, most revitalized you've ever been. So awaken the strength, power, and resilience already in you with the first and only supplement clinically proven to rejuvenate health at the cellular level. Again, Timeline is offering 10% off your order of MitoPure. You go to timeline.com/checkthemic. That's timeline.com, timeline.com/checkthemic. All right, we gave a little path to 30 points for the Chiefs. How can the Eagles score 30 points against the Chiefs here?
It's got to be Saquon, right? Saquon doing what he did against Washington and turning like the first couple of carries into touchdowns.
Steal a 70-yarder.
Yeah.
Here and there. I'll be interested how much they stick with him because the Kansas City defense, the run defense can be really stout, right? They go through these runs where it is like banging your head against a wall. And does Philly get frustrated and turn to the pass game too quickly? Or do they have success early and it helps open everything else up?
This is where he's quite Barry Sanders-like, right? Where you could have games where Barry Sanders would not be having a lot of success, but you knew that his presence out there was, A, terrifying the defense every single time he was out there, and B, you knew that all it took was one play where he might have the last 10 carries might have gone for 8 yards, but the next one could go 75 if somebody blows their gap or if he simply makes a guy miss. And that's the thing with Saquon, right, is that a lot of these runs might not have a lot of success, but you are only ever one play from him just making one cut and gone. Like, I mean, that first touchdown was kind of ridiculous because Washington's defense was a joke on that play. I mean, Dante Fowler caved in the entire side of the defensive front on his own by falling over, and then two individual defensive backs made an absolute mess of it. But the point is, all it takes is one play and one unsound gap or one guy taking a bad angle or, an arm tackle, and the guy can be gone. And that, there's a ton of value to that. but B, it means that you can keep running him knowing that it's not about body blows, but it's like,
it's opportunities. At
exactly.
any point, you don't know when the defense is going to blow a gap, and if they do, they'll take advantage.
It's like we don't necessarily need to have consistent every down success with this. That's not really why we're doing this. Why we're doing this is if we run Saquon Barkley 25 times, the chances are he's having a couple of big plays in here, which could both be touchdowns. Like the 25 runs might equal 14 points, even if only 2 of them were successful.
Yeah, no, I agree. They gotta stick with it. And if they do have success early, I think that does help open everything else up, like it did against Washington. So I think that's a big part of it with Philly. Breakout. They've had games earlier in the year where they started really slow. Remember when they would just kind of sleepwalk through the first half, and then it was the second half, Saquon Barkley. This is kind of strength against strength, right? The Chiefs always find a way to win in the second half. The Eagles have been dominating second halves throughout the season, but I think for Philly, it's got to be a more consistent start to finish and not just lean on you and then, hey, Saquon's going to outrun everybody in the second half. Get those points early. And again, I think the path to success for the Eagles is winning on the outside, right? Against those corners one-on-one, whether it's A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, one-on-ones with Dallas Goedert and Saquon coming out of the backfield. I would say try to steal 30 or 40 non-tush-push rushing yards from Jalen Hurts as well on keepers. And if you put all that together, I think you can have success against Kansas City. The other piece is the Spags factor and trying to solve him, and is very insightful prediction that we said, hey, this game, Buffalo and Kansas City, is going to come down to a key third or fourth down and Spags blitz against Josh Allen, right? We definitely said that at some point, and obviously it came true. Can Philly actually even just avoid those situations? Can they stay out of third and longs enough? Because they're the best team. Once you get into fourth and short, right? They push it. They're pretty successful. But can they stay out of the third and longs and avoid us having to have Twitter discourse on where Jalen Hurts should have gone to the ball with the ball against the 5-man pressure?
Yeah. I also think, though, okay, they are still extremely good at the tush-push thing. They're not as good as they were, though. Like, I don't know if it's just losing Jason Kelsey or, however you want to – it's not as successful as it was. And we just saw what Kansas City was able to do to Buffalo, who was the second best team in the NFL, I think, heading into that game in terms of fourth down success rate, just because they knew what was coming, right? And it doesn't matter if the thing that Buffalo was going to execute was Josh Allen on short yardage, which is usually an extremely high percentage play anyway. The fact that they knew what was headed their way was enough to be able to stack the line of scrimmage, stack the body, stuff the gaps, and kill it effectively, at least in enough plays. Can they come up with something to cause problems to that push play? And even if it's just force it into the counter that at least Philadelphia has and is willing to use, unlike Buffalo, like that could be a thing. Like if they're able to stuff that play on a couple of scenarios, Philadelphia runs that basically anywhere.
Do they
so
have some
confident,
answers
right?
Off of it? Yeah.
So confident in their ability to execute it, are they? Like they might run that, on their own 25-yard line early in the game because they know they can pick it up, keep a drive alive, keep the ball. If Kansas City has some kind of answer to it and is able to do it, even if it's just the first time, right? All of a sudden they're set up on the fringes of the red zone because they got one stop.
Part of that is like Kansas City. Buffalo was forced into 5, 6 fourth down conversion opportunities. That's a good job by Kansas City putting them into these do or die situations, and Buffalo got 4 of them. One of them, 2 of them were touchdowns. But if you're Philly, you don't want to come out of this game and say, man, we had to convert 5 out of 6 on fourth down to pull this thing off. To me, you just want to not even get to that situation, right? And be aggressive. And that's the other touchy-feely aspect of this. Not that there's a strategy for just be good, but if you're up, you have to stay aggressive. If you're up, you have to put the Chiefs away and not just say, hey, we're up 1. Or in Philly's case, they're up 10, right? In that Super Bowl a couple of years ago, give up a long punt return and the whole thing. Like, you can't have that. If you're up, you have to go for it. And if you're up 10, you got to find a way to get up 17. If you're up 3, you got to find a way to get up 10 against Kansas City and not settle. So I think that's going to be a big part of Philly's strategy too, is not even playing the scoreboard, but playing, we need to maximize points against Kansas City because, again, the Chiefs are – even they hadn't scored more than 30 all season, but in the game where they needed to score 32, they did against Buffalo in the AFC Championship.
And all these games in the postseason are the fourth down variable is such a huge part of it now. This has become not the new turnovers, but it's become another mechanism for getting turnovers, right?
Yeah.
Number one, almost all these teams are significantly better at or significantly more aggressive at going for it on fourth down than they used to be. Number two, all the remaining ones for a while now have been amongst the best at converting those. They haven't just been the more aggressive teams. They've been some of the best at actually picking them up. Washington, I think, was the best team in the NFL at fourth down conversion rate in the NFL. Philadelphia is top 5. Buffalo is top 5. Kansas City is top 5. Obviously, Detroit with Dan Campbell, they were always going for it. Like, all of these fourth down teams have been making it to the sharp end of the season. So 2 of the better teams in the NFL converting fourth downs are meeting in the Super Bowl. And that could be the turnover that you're looking for, whether, instead of an interception, instead of a fumble, a fourth down stop could be one.
All right, man. We're going to make predictions in a minute here. Anything else on Philly's offense specifically or Kansas City's defense before we get into our predictions?
No, one element of the Spagnuolo thing is the Chiefs have taken the lead late in all these games where they've been able to then just deploy, release the hounds, and Spags drops the arm and just unleashes the blitz, right? If the Eagles can get a lead and stay in the lead, you at least potentially take some of that off the table, at least, force them to still respect the run game first, the other stuff to try and stop the clock instead of just saying it's pass game now, let's go.
And I know we just saw the Eagles put up 55 and the Chiefs put up a season-high 32, but I'll repeat this again. Both teams are the types of teams that have those long, sustained drives. Mm-hmm. Eagles can put together those 14, 15-play drives. The Chiefs have given up a couple of those in the playoffs here against Houston coming out of the half. And Kansas City has played this whole season like that, right? Kind of ball control, shorten the game, and actually only have 8 or 9 possessions. That's the other key in this game, is if it does become an 8-9 possession game, which is low, right? You're used to 10 or 11, 12. If it's an 8 or 9 possession game, those, again, have to finish in touchdowns for both teams, right? You can't settle for field goals on either side here. So that's, I think, a huge key for Philadelphia is never, them in particular, never settling, playing like you're the underdog, even though it's a pretty even matchup on paper. All right, before our predictions, as a former professional athlete, I care about what I put in my body, especially when it comes to protein. That's why we're so pumped to be sponsored by Orgain. Orgain believes real nutrition has the power to make a real difference in people's lives. Orgain's new 30-gram complete protein shakes offer protein-packed real nutrition designed to satisfy your cravings without any added sugar. Plus, they're an excellent source of premium, ultra-filtered protein with all 9 essential amino acids. Orgain's products are handcrafted with high-quality ingredients. Love drinking these right after my workout, Sam, right up in my office. Beautiful. Whether it's the vanilla, the chocolate, they taste great. It's convenient. Might even take 1 or 2 on the Super Bowl trip with us this week. So we've enjoyed Orgain. Kind of wish I had it when I was a pro athlete. And then from protein powders to bars to shakes to tons of other nutritional products, Orgain has products that the entire family will love. Remember, there are no quick fixes when it comes to your health. If you want more protein, give Orgain's 30-gram protein shakes a try. Head to Orgain.com/checkthemic and use code checkthemic for 30% off your order. That's the best offer you'll find, but you got to use the code checkthemic for 30% off. One last time, 30% off. Head to Orgain.com/checkthemic. Use code checkthemic. Super Bowl, big game prediction here, Sam. Who wins? What's the score?
Score.
And a quick what's on the line, right? We're talking about Kansas City dynasty versus the Eagles winning a Super Bowl.
I think the result will be the same as last time. I think the Kansas City Chiefs will win in a close game against Philadelphia, 35-33.
Wow. Yeah, I'll just say Chiefs by 3.
Okay. It's not a score.
Chiefs by
fine.
3. We'll say 27-24. Chiefs play the same game every week. They play the same game every week, basically, right? How do we win by 3? So Chiefs win by 3. What's on the line here? Legacy-wise, Mahomes, Chiefs, dynasty-wise, first team to three-peat, 5 Super Bowls in 6 years, 5 Super Bowl appearances in 6 years. What's on the line here for the Chiefs?
I mean, obviously history, all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's cementing them as maybe the most dominant team over a short period of time of all time, like ever. A lot of the Patriots, obviously, as you said, you described that as essentially two different dynasties separated a little bit over 20 years, right? The 49ers, the Steelers of the 70s, like you've had these the Cowboys of where they won 3 and 4. I mean, we're getting to the degree where nobody's had the kind of stretch that Kansas City has had, or at least to get to that, you've got to go back before the Super Bowl, right? You've got to go back to like Lombardi or a Packers, that type of thing. So, they are putting together a resume of dominance that has never happened before.
Yeah, I think well summed up. I think in this tight 6-7 year window, maybe as dominant as anyone if they come away with the win. And no real signs of slowing down. Could be Kelsey. Are there any rumblings that it could be Kelsey's last game? I think we're just assuming based off age and the fact that he looks slower and maybe going out on top that this could be it for
right.
Kelsey. But that's just something to keep an eye on here. DeAndre Hopkins, another fun story, as he goes for his, came to win a championship. Marquise Brown was talking about, hey, we're going to win I want to go win a championship. I want to go play in the Super Bowl. So all those guys, they care. There's a lot on the line there. And then from a Philly perspective, we've half joked a lot about how bad the season's been for the Giants, watching Saquon go have the success with their division rival. But what a move if Saquon and the Eagles win this game. And you talk about we always rave about Howie Roseman and the job that he does as the general manager. The entire organization, it's well run. They make far more good moves than bad, and it's really added up. And what an offseason from the draft to free agency and getting the Eagles back to the Super Bowl with a lot of turnover on their roster from just 2 years ago when they were in the Super Bowl. I think proving just how good that front office really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I would pay a significant subscription to have a dedicated, like the second screen thing. Yeah, to have John Mara just at all times. Just a fly on the wall cam for John Mara watching the Super Bowl.
We've talked to the TV people, but Janko can, confirm whatever. There's 14, 16, there's like an X number of cameras, right? And there was a year that a prominent owner was upset that he wasn't one of the chosen 16 cameras or whatever, so he didn't get like his shot of him winning or whatever. I would dedicate one camera to John Mara, wherever he is, I would dedicate one of those.
Every big Saquon play, we go full screen with John Mara cam.
Yes,
to see him presumably like head in hands, in tears or whatever. It would be pretty funny.
How about MVP candidate? Let's do an off the radar candidate. So instead of either quarterback here, Mahomes or Hurts, give me who could be an MVP candidate.
I mean, obviously Saquon.
Saquon for the Eagles.
Yeah. I mean, he might be favored even with Jalen Hurts there for that team.
That's true.
I mean, A.J. Brown is capable of that kind of game. Zach Bond, like if he's able to force another fumble, come up with a turnover, have a couple of big splash plays on defense.
You'd have to have like 2 picks.
Right. But you could,
Ed Reed Blankenship picks up a couple errant throws over the middle of the field.
It requires the neither quarterback being spectacular Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
But like it's the Malcolm Smith game, right, where you have the one spectacular turnover play in the Super Bowl and neither quarterback was amazing.
The defense was the story.
Yeah, so you end up winning the MVP. I mean, Zach Bond could be the guy in that defense that does that.
I could see Kelsey on the other side too, right? There was a point in Brady's run where like Deion Branch just won one of the MVPs. Sometimes you get bored of just giving it to the quarterback. So if you get like a 10-catch game from Kelsey, he could be MVP, retire, the whole thing. So those are your other MVP candidates. Let's have some fun with our prize picks. Only one game to play here to set a lineup. So I'll let you go first. Talk about your prize picks lineup and what we're looking at here for the big game.
Okay, I've gone with 4, but you also get there's like a free square, right? A bonus square.
So you really have 5.
Yeah, so you get Mahomes with a free play of more than a half passing yard. So let's assume that probably happens. So it's effectively 5 for me, and yet somehow it's still worth less than yours, which with a pick fewer.
I had some rare ones here.
I'm going with Noah Gray to have more than 11.5 receiving yards.
Oh, stealing Kelsey's thunder here.
Noah Gray is exactly the type of receiver that pops up with a big play in the Super Bowl because Mahomes decides it's Noah Gray time. So more than 11.5 receiving yards. I was also thinking about putting him in there for a touchdown, but I decided against it. Xavier Worthy, he's going to have less than 56.5 receiving yards. I don't think he's going to be the fulcrum through which this offense operates. So less than 56.5 for Xavier Worthy. A.J. Brown, though, I'm buying that's going to be a repeat, and he's going to have more than 5 receptions for the Eagles. And then back to the well with Chris Jones, more than a quarter of a sack. So if he even registers a half sack, we're getting it.
We hate half sacks unless they help with the PrizePicks lineup here.
I don't have to like them. I just have to be able to exploit them.
No, those are good. I think A.J. Brown does get fed, and I can see what you're saying with Worthy. I think, getting away from receivers against the Eagles the way they play and going more the tight end route, I think makes a lot of sense in your lineup there.
Absolutely.
So that's your big game lineup. We all get the Mahomes free square. So I went with some fun ones here. I got Isaiah Pacheco going more than 21.5 rushing yards. And I know Kareem Hunt has kind of stolen, some of his carries and everything, but I think Pacheco's just going to, they're going to lean on him, that toughness up the middle. He'll have a couple carries that'll get him there. So more than 21.5. They have a few more options over at PrizePicks right now, so I figured why not go Trent McDuffie, the cornerback, more than a half pass deflection. He's going to break up a pass because McDuffie's awesome. Mm-hmm. Had like 3 against Houston in that game. Had the huge one in the Super Bowl last year against the Niners. Trent McDuffie, big game player, and he'll be a big game player again here. He's going to be in that tight man coverage, everything I'm talking about. So against Devontae Smith, against A.J. Brown, he'll have one of those pass deflections. And then I'm going Dallas Goedert finding the end zone, more than a half rushing and or receiving touchdown here for Goedert. So Dallas Goedert, I think, is going to be a key player as well. The Eagles need all these guys. So Goedert, A.J. Brown, they all have to come through. I got Goedert finding the end zone. So Isaiah Pacheco, more than 21.5 rushing. Trent McDuffie, more than the half pass deflection. And Dallas Goedert, more than a half rushing or receiving touchdown.
I definitely thought about the McDuffie one there for mine as well, but I'm going with Noah Gray with more than 11.5 receiving yards. Xavier Worthy, less than 56.5 receiving yards. A.J. Brown with more than 5 receptions. And then Chris Jones with more than a quarter of a sack.
And you too can play along over at PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code CheckTheMic. Get $50 instantly when you play $5. Again, code CheckTheMic on PrizePicks. $50 instantly when you play $5. Get ready. They'll have some projections for combine time usually show up, 40 times and everything. All sorts of fun stuff over at PrizePicks. All right, man, final thoughts, wrap up as we head into Super Bowl week and what we're going to be doing, everything that's going on. Tell the people.
Well, my final thought we're doing this. I think this is kind of going to be the tenor of the analysis heading into this game as well. The Chiefs are favorites. It is a narrow favorite tag, though, and it's sort of like all the discussion feels like it's going to be, how do the Eagles pull this off? Are we kind of ignoring just how good the Eagles are? Like, they have like one loss against a Washington team that was basically perfect when they had that one loss since very early in the season. And they've looked very impressive in this run of knocking off some what were supposed to be very good teams. I mean, they stomp Green Bay, they stomp Washington, annihilate them in the championship game. It was closer against the Rams, but at least in periods of that game, it looked like they had it well under control. Are we overlooking just how good the Eagles are?
We might be. I think we might be overlooking them just a little bit, myself included. I feel like we're conditioned to say, no one's betting against the Chiefs anymore. They always find a way to pull these games off, even when Buffalo is at their best and Baltimore is at their best. That is what has separated Kansas City, like I said earlier, maybe from the other dynasties. They haven't really slipped up, right? Of course, they're not perfect. They haven't won every Super Bowl in the last 7 years. But they haven't really had a lot of slip-ups, and they've faced some good teams. Last year's Niners team was very good. 2 years ago, Philadelphia, very good. Last year's Ravens team was as good as it gets. So I think that's the issue is Kansas City's just continued to not slip up in the playoffs. But you're right. I mean, is this the best team that Kansas City has faced? I think they're capable of it. When you talk about the ceiling that the Eagles can bring to the table, they just dropped 55 on Washington. while, forcing turnovers and everything, they can do that.
Yeah.
So I think the ceiling that the Eagles have might be as high as any team, right with last year's Ravens, I would say.
And it's still fair, I think, to say, like, in what is effectively a coin flip game, that you lean on Kansas City because, history. And the Eagles, as you said, they've turned over most of this team since the last time they were in the Super Bowl. Most of the Chiefs team was in the Super Bowl a year ago and won it, right? Like, this is a unique team, really in NFL history, in terms of experience doing all this stuff, right? However, like, all the sort of talk about needing to learn how to win and all this kind of stuff, this Chiefs team has done it, and all the important parts of the team have done it. Like, nobody is working with that volume of just confidence that this is how this goes, right? Like, Josh Allen and the Bills can't get over that hump against Kansas City, right? Even if they beat them in the regular season, late in the game, they are still working from this psychological deficit where Kansas City knows if they get the ball back, they just march up the field, they score, they win. Buffalo is working from this point of view of, we've never done this yet. Like, we are trying to get over this hurdle of Kansas City in the postseason in critical times, and they're not quite able to make it happen, whether it's getting screwed by the officials on a fourth down call, whether it's a blitz where Allen puts a miracle ball in the air and Kincaid can't quite make the catch. Like, they're just not quite making those plays. And I don't know how much of a factor this is, but the psychological advantage Kansas City has to be some kind of factor.
I wonder, first off, I just hope we're not talking about the officials coming out of this.
Yes.
That's the first thing. And then you can't account for when the Chiefs' voodoo magic kicks in, like Drake Greenlaw is about to run out onto the field and just blows out his Achilles or whatever, right? The injury factor within a game, you just never know when that thing's going to show up. But yeah, there is this element of, I used to think it was overrated in sports when you say, well, this team's experienced and this team's never done it before. It's like, well, you've never done it before until you actually do it, right? The Chiefs were inexperienced once upon a time as well. But it has shown up more and more with Kansas City, the ability to just not make mistakes, play a clean game, and then play a clean game in the clutch, right? With the game on the line, Kansas City always seems to come through. At least they have for the majority of the last 3 or 4 years.
And it makes sense. Like, when you hear people talk about sports psychologists and stuff, like, one of the things they're always telling players, athletes to do is to, like, visualize the thing you're trying to do. Like, that's almost 101 with this sports psychology stuff, is visualize every success you want. It's not quite manifestation, but it's getting in that direction, right? What is a more powerful visualizer of success than literally having done it last year, right? That's the advantage Kansas City is working from, is they don't have to, like, make it up, invent it in their own imagination. They can just recall what it was like the last time you successfully executed this Herculean task that everybody else is trying to do. You've already done it. So it has to be a psychological advantage. And again, maybe it's only, a small percentage point here and there, but it's the same logic as fourth down stuff. All we're trying to do is steal small winning percentage points here or there. That has to be one that registers. Like, I don't know how much of the overall pie chart that is, but it's a notable slice. Like, it's visually significant in that slice in the pie chart of reasons for success.
All right, man. Well, we're excited for a big week. We're heading down to New Orleans. It's going to be a lot more behind-the-scenes type of content. Hopefully bring you guys to the Super Bowl with us, wherever we're going, right? So the people that we see, the guests that we see, maybe we get invited to a party or two. Maybe we could capture some of that. Who knows? And as of now, I'll be going to my first Super Bowl, so I'm excited.
Yeah, and let us know if there's places in New Orleans, things in New Orleans we should be doing. Like, what would you like to see us do behind the scenes?
Yes, where would you like to see us go? Who do we need to talk to? Hopefully have some fun guests on the show.
Places we should eat, things we should see, all that kind of thing.
Send us all the stuff. Send us all the stuff.
How many times have you been in New Orleans?
This will be my third time, I believe.
Yeah, this will be second for me. I've only been there once before. So
I did like 6 hours there one night.
Right. Neither one of us are particularly New Orleans, steeped in New Orleans overall. So we need some direction.
Yeah, we went right from the Senior Bowl to a night in New Orleans, right to a flight.
Nice.
One year, and then I went and caught Monday Night Football, Lions Saints, back in 2015, after some meetings down there. So going back, looking forward to it. All right, man, that's it. Last show here in the studio as well. Rest in peace.
No more heads on the wall.
So new place. We'll be at home, just me, the kids running around. Sam's gonna be great for a few weeks. We'll be a little remote. Stick with us on YouTube, and then we'll be in our studio soon.
Yep, brand new studio.
signing
build.
off for now for the last time from PFF Studios. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again next time on Check the Mic.